Today we're going to be writing our descriptive text that we talked about, describing the village where Gunnar and his family live. We're going to write in the first person, so we're going to be using I. That's important because you are going to be writing as if you are Gunnar showing somebody around his village. We're going to use those extended noun phrases we talked about, so adding adjectives and things in front of nouns to give more description. And we're going to use relative clauses, which basically means those fronted adverbials, those interesting sentence openers, putting extra information between commas, that kind of thing. But before we do that, let's read chapter 4. All eyes were turned in the same direction, out over the sea. A huge ball of light had appeared on the horizon and was moving towards them, silver beams radiating from it across the white-capped waves, the pulse of beating wings growing louder the closer it came. Grim had let go of Gunnar, and he rose to his feet just as the radiance broke into an arrowhead shape made up of 9 separate lights. For a moment, Gunnar thought it was a skein of musical glowing geese, the brightest at the tip, the rest angled behind it, 4 on either side. Then he gasped, and there were screams from those around him as the shapes gradually became clear. The lights were enormous flying wolves with riders on their backs. Gunnar glanced at Mother and was amazed to see her smiling. "I fear no man," muttered Scully, eyes narrowed, hand on his sword hilt. "But what monsters are these? This must be a dream or some kind of madness." "It's neither," said Mother, turning to glare at him. "Don't you recognise them from the old stories, you fool? Don't you know who they are?" Her voice rose until it almost cracked. "They're coming! Odin's Valkyries are coming!" Gunnar knew about the Valkyries. They were Odin's shield maidens, legendary beings who rode winged wolves. In the old tongue, their name meant choosers of the fallen, and Odin sent them to collect the bravest men, any warrior who fought against great odds and was killed with a sword in his hand. The Valkyries carried them to Valhalla, the hall of fallen heroes, where they would feast until the day of Ragnarok, the terrible reckoning at the end of time, when they would fight for Odin against the forces of darkness. Now Gunnar understood why Mother was smiling. The Valkyries were coming for the only man who had died a true hero's death that night. At last, the beating of enormous wings filled the air above them, and the giant wolves swept down to land. The flames in the longhouse had begun to subside, but now there was a greater brightness, the wolves and their riders giving off an eerie shimmering glow as they reached out to touch everything with silver, even the trees in the forest and the high snowy peaks of the distant mountains. The wolves were creatures of nightmare, each the size of a horse, but with bristling grey pelts and huge leathery wings. Their eyes glowed red, and blood dripped from their muzzles as if they had come from some ghastly carrion feast, which might have explained the foul odour they brought with them. They swished their tails, snarling and showing their glistening fangs, swinging their massive heads from side to side, tugging at the reins held by the riders. The Valkyries were an even more terrifying sight than the wolves. Gunnar felt a chill of fear as he studied them. 9 tall women warriors in black chainmail and black cloaks, all holding red shields and spears with leaf-shaped blades, the points sparkling like stars. Their faces were completely hidden in black helmets, with visors in the shape of a raven's curved beak. There was a muttering in the crowd, desperate prayers to Odin and Thor, and the whimperings of those whose minds had given way. The 4 surviving dogs of the wolfmen lay with stomachs pressed to the ground, ears flat to their heads, whining in terror. The leading Valkyrie dismounted and walked over to Father's body. She took off her helmet, and Gunnar gasped as her coldly beautiful face was revealed. Her long black hair had the glossy sheen of a raven's wing, and her eyes were like two dark pools. "I am Brunhild, Queen of the Valkyries," she said, her voice echoing in Gunnar's head. "Who speaks for this warrior? Who will tell me his name?" For a long moment, no one dared reply. The only sounds, the steady crackling of flames and the whining of the dogs. Gunnar stepped forward. Brunhild turned to face him, her eyes boring into his, but he stood his ground, meeting her eyes with his head held high, refusing to show he was scared. "I speak for my father," he said. "I am Gunnar Bjornsson, and he was." His voice faltered, and he felt tears fill his eyes, but he steadied himself and carried on, his voice gaining strength with every word. "He was Bjorn, son of Sigurd, holder of this steading that has been ours since before remembering, and that coward had him murdered." Gunnar spat out the last part and pointed an accusing finger at Scully. Brunhild swung round to stare at the man. Grim and the rest of the wolfmen had backed away, their faces masks of terror. Scully was left alone with Gunnar and Mother, Father's body beside them, but he met Brunhild's gaze too. "It was battle, not murder," Scully said, shrugging. "He gave as good as he got." "But it was you that attacked us, you that killed Arnor and Ranulf and burned down our home," Gunnar yelled. "My father was only defending his family. He had no quarrel with you." "Such is the way of things, boy," snapped Scully. "Man is to wolf to man." "But what you did was a crime," said Gunnar, turning to Brunhild. "Aren't you going to punish him for it? Isn't that what the gods are for?" "We are servants of the gods, not gods ourselves," said Brunhild. "We take fallen warriors to Valhalla. You must pray to Odin for anything more." Gunnar stared at her, desperately trying to think of something he could say that would make her help him. For the briefest of instants, he thought he could see a softening in those cold raven eyes, but he couldn't be sure. "Come, Gunnar," said Mother. "We must let them take your father." He looked at her, and she smiled and kissed his forehead. Gunnar gave in, and Mother and son stood next to each other, their hands clasped. "Sisters, lift up the fallen warrior," said Brunhild. The Valkyries dismounted and lashed their spears together, covering them with their cloaks to make a bier. They raised Father from the ground and placed him on it, breaking off the arrow in his chest and laying Deathbringer there, folding his fingers around the hilt. At last, Brunhild and her Valkyries climbed into their saddles. "Wait!" said Gunnar. He ran over to Brunhild and grabbed her reins, gazing up at her as she towered above them on her wolf. The creature growled softly and shook its huge head. "Scully ordered Grim to kill me just before you came," Gunnar said quietly. "How can I save myself?" Brunhild stared down at him. "This might be your day to die, or it might not. Only the Norns truly know what your fate will be in this world, Gunnar. But now is the moment when you must say goodbye to your father." Gunnar let go of her reins, a picture forming in his mind of 3 old women in ragged black cloaks, the Norns. Mother came across to him, and they bent to kiss Father. Brunhild spurred her mount into the air. The Valkyries followed her, and they flew into the dark sky with a great beating of wings. "That was incredible. Amazing," muttered Grim, shaking his head and staring at the glow on the horizon. He moved forward to stand beside Scully. "I never thought I'd see anything like that and live to tell the tale." "And just what kind of tale will that be, Grim?" said Scully. "One about how brave you were? It had better not be. You and your lads behaved like a bunch of frightened girls. It was only me and the boy who stood up to them." "So, you don't want me to kill him?" said Grim, looking puzzled. "Did I say that?" muttered Scully. "The boy definitely takes after its father, which means I want him dead more than ever. Get on with it, Grim." "Yes, of course," spluttered Grim. "You men, hold the boy." Gunnar went cold as the nearest two wolfmen moved towards him. Then he sighed. What was the point of struggling? Maybe it was better to give up, to end all this anguish. Grim was advancing, dagger in hand, and Gunnar could almost feel the steel blade slicing into his throat already. Then Mother grabbed a knife from the belt of the nearest wolfman and slashed at Grim with it, an arc of blood spraying from his cheek. Scully and the other wolfmen stared at Mother with their mouths open. "Run!" she screamed at Gunnar, their eyes locking for an instant, and he knew she was giving him what might be his only chance to live. So he fled. He dodged the grasping hands of a wolfman who slipped and fell behind him. He ran past the people of the farm, hurdled the still terrified whining dogs, and headed for the gate and the forest beyond. He heard Scully yelling and realised he was being chased. An arrow whistled past his cheek. He ducked to one side, and a second arrow just missed him. A third hit the gatepost as he ran through the open gate, but now his feet were on track into the forest, the trees ahead of him like a solid wall of darkness, the cold wind rustling through their tops and making a noise like the sea. 10 paces to go, 5 paces, and he was swallowed up. The outside world gone, the shadows between the trunks as black as death. Right, 5 things that have happened so far. Pause the video and have a think, and then we'll look at the ones that I came up with. Okay, so I had 1. Gunnar heard horses and warned his parents. 2. Scully came and warned Bjorn about raiders. Number 3. Bjorn refused to join Scully. Number 4. Scully came back and attacked the village. And finally, Bjorn was killed and taken away by the Valkyries, but Gunnar escaped. So our story's getting quite exciting now. So today you're going to write your descriptions of the village. As I said, you are writing as if you are Gunnar, telling a new friend about the village where he came from. So imagine after he's escaped, he's met somebody and they'll say, "What was your village like?" And this is what you would say to them, or this is what you would write about. How are we going to start this? Because we can't just start the village, that's boring. So let's think of some ways to start it. We could start with something like, "Let me tell you about my village." Or, "You'd really like my village." Or, "I do miss my village. It has..." And so on. So you can use one of those, or you can think of your own interesting opening sentence for your description. So this is the example that I wrote, or part of it. "Let me tell you about my village. When you arrive, the first thing you see are the great wooden gates. They are made of the strongest wood, and at either side there is a tall guard tower. The guards, who are supposed to be on duty all night, sit up in the towers keeping watch. Once the guards have let you in, you can begin to explore my village. The village, where I have lived all my life, is very special to me. A deep well stands at the village's centre. Made of stone, the well was the first thing built here. We use the well for all our fresh water. To the left of the well is the blacksmith's shop. All day long one hears the clang of the blacksmith's powerful hammer clattering down on his iron anvil. The blacksmith makes all our weapons, as well as the nails and other ironwork we need for our boats." So I've only described what the gates, the well and the blacksmiths. I'm sure you've got lots of things on top of that that you can describe in yours as well, and I look forward to seeing them. Bye.